So tatvamasi, this is the practice. Very simple. When I'm interacting with humanity in any way, whether it's out in the world or watching television or a video like this, and I am feeling in any way emotionally charged, plus or minus, positive or negative, any kind of judgment that I have, right, complimentary or condescending about another person, I want to follow that up by saying that phrase, tatvamasi, or I am that. And I want to remember, right, that piece of advice that Deepak gave, which is all relationship is a mirror, right? So what's happening now? I go out to the store. I was at the shopping store today, at the grocery store, food shopping, and I see an elderly woman who's walking out, and one of the items in the bottom of her shopping cart falls out, and a kid runs over and he picks it up. And she's at her car now. She's opening her car. Her shopping cart's behind her. The kid just puts the item in the cart, doesn't say a word, and then walks away. And I'm like, you know what? That's so awesome. Good on him. And then I say, tatvamasi. That's me. And thank you, God, for creating me exactly like that. Most of us never learned how to train our brains, which is why most of us needlessly settle, struggle, and worse, suffer. My name is Chris Doris, and I want to make brain training mainstream. This is my series, Tough Talks, Conversations on Mental Toughness. I'm interviewing badasses from all walks of life on what mental toughness means to them and their unique approaches to strengthening their minds. Hey everyone, welcome back to Tough Talks, Conversations on Mental Toughness. And I am your host, Chris Doris. I am also your guest today. Flying solo, I felt compelled to do that today. So our topic du jour is, the title of this episode is Mental Toughness and Racism, starting with same. The subtitle, starting with same or sameness. Show me a racist baby. Of course you can't. It's not possible, right? That doesn't exist. Show me a racist three-year-old. You can't. And this is really fascinating. It's not possible because developmentally speaking, humans are incapable of even comprehending differentness until about age 6. And even then, there's no such thing as a 6-year-old racist. That's just when humans can begin to actually comprehend the message that we're different from each other. That's some interesting stuff. Let's slow that down. That's a huge point. That's why the subtitle is starting with same, because we do, right? When we start life, of course, we don't have any racism. We don't have racist biases. We don't have prejudices. We haven't learned that stuff yet, right? It's all learned. That means it's not nature, it's nurture, which means racism is unnatural. Isn't that interesting? Like, it has to be learned. We become well educated over time, but prior to that, we are all existing in the sameness mentality, oneness, connectedness, not practicing acknowledging differences, and not creating armies of belief systems to support separateness and differences. So isn't that fascinating that we are neurologically, physiologically, psychologically, literally incapable of being racist when we start life? What if we remember that a lot more? I'm certain I'm not the first person to ever throw that out there to you. I'm sure we've all had this thought before, but I don't think we have this thought enough. I want to be remembering that more and more and more. We are the same. Well, my favorite he was actually a psychiatrist. My favorite of all the people from the world of psychology and history is Carl Jung. And he had a phrase, which is one of his quotes is, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And that reminds me of another quote from one of my favorite teachers in the world and on the planet today, Dr. Deepak Chopra. I was actually in a conversation with him. He was giving me some relationship advice several years ago, and I was being a whiny little victim, complaining, and he interrupted me during this conversation. He just said, "Chris, all relationship is a mirror." And he just left it at that. It was actually a text exchange. And he just left it at that. That was the end. He left me with that. And I am so thankful that he did. All of relationship is a mirror. It's basically just saying, what you're seeing, what you're complaining about is another human being reflecting the part of you back to you that you're not really digging. That's a humble down moment, and that's a profound moment. This is like maybe 10 years ago, and I remember it vividly. That one anchored, right? That's settled in, and I'm glad. And I hope that you're hearing it too, right? So now, speaking of Deepak, I've been to several of his workshops, retreats. One of the exercises that we did that stuck with me, and I've used in all of my coaching since then, is entitled, and this is Sanskrit. It's Tat Tavam Asi. Right, those are 3 words: T-A-T, second word T-V-A-M, third word A-S-I. Tat Tavam Asi in Sanskrit, loosely translated, it means that thou are, or translated again, like I am that. All right, so this is so it's an exercise. I'm going to share it with you. It's an exercise in getting back to practicing recognizing sameness in others in the effort of returning to our pre-educated, prejudicial, racist states. Right? So Tat Tavam Asi, this is the practice. Very simple. When I'm interacting with humanity in any way, whether it's out in the world or watching television or a video like this, and I am feeling in any way emotionally charged, plus or minus, positive or negative, any kind of judgment that I have, right, complimentary or condescending about another person, I want to follow that up by saying that phrase, Tat Tavam Asi, or I am that. And I want to remember, right, that piece of advice that Deepak gave, which is all relationship is a mirror, right? So what's happening now? I go out to the store. I was at the shopping store today, at the grocery store, food shopping, and I see an elderly woman who's walking out, and one of the items in the bottom of her shopping cart falls out, and a kid runs over and he picks it up. And she's at her car now. She's opening her car. Her shopping cart's behind her. The kid just puts the item in the cart, doesn't say a word, and then walks away. And I'm like, you know what? That's so awesome. Good on him. And then I say, Tat Tavam Asi. That's me. And thank you, God, for creating me exactly like that. And that's the practice. Now, similarly, say the scenario was this. The elderly woman's coming out of the grocery store, item falls off the bottom of the cart. She doesn't know it. She's going to her car. Kid comes over, grabs it. It's like soda or something. Bolts. Steals it. And I'm like, what a little jerk off. Right? And I get into judgment. Now, I'll probably go yell at the kid. But after the experience is over, then I want to say, Tat Tavam Asi. That's me, and thank you, God, for making me exactly like that. Now you're like, what are you talking about? You're a thief? Well, look, we contain the seeds of everything within us. That's what really this lesson is about, Tat Tavam Asi, is that we all contain the seeds of everything. That doesn't mean I'm active. I've stolen shit. I have been a thief. Yeah, I shoplifted shit when I was a kid. I've probably stolen stuff more recently than that. we all possess everything within ourselves. It doesn't mean we're activating it, but we are. But so the practice is I'm not condoning that kid's behavior, right? But what I'm doing is I'm interrupting myself from continuing to deepen my mastery at recognizing sameness, as seeing me as other than and different from and certainly better than. I want to interrupt the hell out of that practice. I don't need to put any more love into that shit. Right? Instead, I want to break that down and replace it with re-strengthening my ability to acknowledge oneness, to acknowledge sameness. So whether somebody I see an act of beauty, I'm like, that is beautiful, and I have that, I am that. Thank you, God, for making me like that. And then I see an act of like thievery or selfishness or meanness, and I'll take my action to correct that. But then again, afterwards, then I will say, Tatvamasi, I am that. Thank you, God, for making me exactly like that too. Removing judgment, right? Acknowledging sameness. Now, why did I entitle this? Well, I already explained the starting with same, because we all do start with same. We are in the sameness. That's all we can know is connectedness and sameness. And but the main title, Mental Toughness and Racism. So what is the relationship there? Well, the relationship is strong. You could easily make the argument that mental toughness is predicated upon identifying beliefs and then manipulating them if need be, right? Beliefs. Beliefs are so sneaky, right? These invisible things, this phenomena that occur, these beliefs that take up residence in our minds and govern how we live, govern how we even see reality, how we even interpret or experience reality. Our beliefs govern us. So this is some sophisticated work. Mental toughness is about discovering your beliefs, that being able to that's a big deal. We'll talk about how to do this in a second. Examining them, deciding whether or not you agree with them and what you're going to do, keep it or not, and if you don't like it, then replacing the beliefs. So we're talking specifically, of course, about all the beliefs that we've learned about racial bias, racism, and prejudice. I know that prejudice and racism are not identical, but they are. They have the common thread of they're born out of. They're in the subject of differentness, right? I am different. You are different than me, and I am different than you, and in a better way, I am different than you. So that's all learned. So one of the ways that I discover my beliefs is by watching my mouth, is by paying attention to what I'm saying, right? Because there is no better giveaway. Like our language is a dead giveaway, right? Indisputable evidence of our thoughts, right? Or our beliefs. So I want to watch my mouth. All right, I want to get into the practice of listening to what I'm saying as if I'm someone else listening to the words, right? And then being in the inquiry, right, of do I agree with that? Do I even agree with what I just said? Okay, so you have a conversation, you walk away from it, and maybe you got a little defensive, right? And maybe you, in your defensiveness, you weren't speaking from your highest self, right? And then you ask yourself afterwards, do I even agree with what I said? So you discovered, let's say, that you got defensive. You got defensive because someone was insulting you, or maybe not even insulting, just giving you feedback because you're abrasive, we'll say. I don't know where I got that one. So I get a little defensive, and then I walk away, so I realize I said some things that I didn't like. Now dig a little bit deeper. I acknowledged that I was getting defensive. I was defending. What is it? Why? What happened that got my dander up? What was I defending against? Right? And it was the insinuation or maybe accusation that I am abrasive. Okay, and so I'm already starting to discover some beliefs. So I'm believing that that's a problem. Otherwise, why would I defend it? Like that, I have some inferiority. So let's just go with that. That's one of several beliefs that could arise from this, right? And one is that I am inadequate because I say hurtful shit. I insult people. I'm abrasive, and that's bad. So I'm bad. So and it needs to be defended because I don't want that. No, I am not. You are. So I go to the work of defending that. So I acknowledge that. Okay, so I'm believing that one, I probably am abrasive. I certainly am defending it, and if I'm defending it, that's an alarm. That's an alarm going off saying, here's a belief. You got a belief, and you don't like it, or otherwise you wouldn't be going to the effort of defending. You'd be completely relinquishing the need to defend. Right? So I believe that I'm inadequate. So all right. So forget about being abrasive. It's just that's one example of my inadequacy. And so when I examine that, do I believe it, that's useful? Does that serve me? No, that sure as hell doesn't. Believing that I'm inadequate in any way, anything less than an expression of divine grace in human form, doesn't serve me. Okay, so now I'm making the decision, discard that. Replace it with what? Well, I'll have that mantra. Why don't I say that? Not only am I not inadequate, I am divine grace in human form. This is my I ams list. That's the first one. I am divine grace. Right? That's what you do with it. And you recite that. You have that be your new belief. You have to hammer it. You got to hammer it. Repeat it dozens and hundreds and thousands of times until you remember that until that now is your new belief. So that's okay. So racism is a belief. It's just simply a belief system. Now, 5 points that I wanted to make here beyond that commentary. I'd like to say that the most mentally tough people who by the way, happen to tend to be the happiest and the most successful people as well. And when I say success, I define success as having your life on your terms, right? Being in love with your life. So the most mentally tough people, I say that they choose to exist in a state of perpetual self-inquiry. So what do I mean by that? Now, I mean that they're always asking, and they're doing this with enthusiasm because they know that this is them growing stronger every day, always being in question, asking yourself questions like, do I agree with what I just said in that conversation? Do I agree with the way I was? Right? How's the state that I'm creating? What emotional state am I thinking my way into in this moment? And is it serving me? Right? So with respect to my inquiry about my own racism, for the sake of being truly thorough, I want the inquiry to be this. How racist am I really? I want to totally humble down. I want to completely relinquish any need to defend myself here, right? I want to totally humble down and operate, stay with me. I want to actually, for the sake of being truly committed to healing myself, right, of any racist learning, and therefore, and having that be part of my contribution to eradicating racism on the planet, then I want to operate from the assumption that I am way more racist than I'm aware of right now. I want to totally operate. That's not self-deprecating. That's commitment to being damn thorough. Like I want to remove all the cancer, not some of it. I want to remove all of it. So I want to be looking in there to see, well, how much is there? I don't know how much there is. I'm just going to assume there's more than I see right now. And that's an intelligent assumption to operate from. Okay, that's commitment to growth. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point is I want to use beginner's mind here, right? I want to really let go of any, I know this. I know the roots of racism. It's a systemic issue. But yeah. Okay, whatever. It's like shut up. Let's like really humble down and again operate here in this unbelievably important inquiry and examination, self-examination. I want to. Well, in Zen, it's called beginner's mind. I want to operate from the assumption that I don't know shit about this. I'm starting from scratch here. I am a know-it-none, not a know-it-all. I'm a know-it-none, N-O-N-E. Okay, so that's the second point. So self-inquiry. I want to. The first point is I want to ask myself the question: how much racism is in me? How much of that virus do I have? Second point is I want to start with beginner's mind and go into this inquiry with just completely clean slate mind, beginner's mind. Now, a third point here is this is a topic that absolutely requires incredibly deep listening. We're going to talk about this for a second because this is a big deal. You know, it's funny. I mentioned earlier Deepak Chopra. I studied many moons ago. I studied in India at a place called the Oneness University, which is pretty relevant to this topic, isn't it? The Oneness University. And after I had completed my study, which is down in southern India at Oneness, I came back up to Mumbai, and I was attending one of Deepak Chopra was giving a lecture, and I happened to be with him in the green room before he was going on stage to deliver this lecture at this big theater. And he was asking me about my experience at Oneness. And I have a picture of this. I wish I have a picture of this digitally. I wish I had thought about this in advance and printed out to show you because it's a beautiful picture. So I'm so glad there was a photographer there and that they captured this moment. So he's asking me about Oneness, and I'm telling him, and I'm just like on cloud nine. I had this like the coolest personal development, personal growth, spiritual experience of my life, and I'm sharing it. And I'm all super high vibes, and he's a little bit shorter than me, so he's like the pictures of him looking, right, and he's just like this with his hands on his hips. And he's just like staring at me like a kid would. A kid that's like in rapture, hearing like the most fascinating kid's tale, like listening to Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. And he's just like totally in rapture. And I remember it, and I remember, and this is like a really important part of this. Why am I telling you this? Is because of how I felt with him being so intently dialed in with the deepest listening. I mean, I could see it in his eyes. I could see his listening in his eyes. And you know how I felt? I felt a combination of things. I felt fucking important. I felt smart. I felt relevant. I felt significant. That's what great listening does. My career is predicated upon phenomenal listening. It always has been as a clinical social worker and as a licensed therapist, and now, of course, as a coach. When I'm coaching someone, I have a ritual before the coaching session starts, and the ritual includes me telling myself, I'm now leaving the world of Chris Doris. I'm leaving my world and entering into the world of this other person. Whether I've ever met them, it could be a first session or it could be a 100th and 90th session. It doesn't matter. I'm leaving my world and entering into the world. I got to tell you, that's pretty freaking fun. You know, it takes practice, but it is like what a cool thing to be able to do. And you don't have to be a coach to be able to do that. You have to have ears. You have to have another person in your life and listen to them, and practice. Let's all commit to practicing being, you know, of course, this skill of being phenomenal listeners extends well beyond, you know, addressing racism. But you know what? I really am of a lot of people are saying this too, and I'm really psyched about that. Like I read an article yesterday that Larry Fitzgerald, who's a superstar American football player, wide receiver, plays for the Arizona Cardinals, super amazing dude. Met him once, and he insisted. And just side note, I met him, and my friend was introducing him to me, and my friend said, "This is my buddy CD." And he goes, what does CD stand for? I said, it's my initials, Chris Doris. He goes, nice to meet you, Mr. Doris. I'm like, you call me CD. He's like, nice to meet you, Mr. Doris. This dude is a class act. And he wrote a piece for the New York Times this week on racism. And it was beautiful. And he was talking really, I mean, just really beautiful article. He's so smart and articulate and gets and kind and classy. And he was talking about how important it is to listen. And I couldn't agree more. So the power of being a phenomenal listener, like entering into the other person's world. Now that's a segue right into the next point that I wanted to make, the fourth one, which is, so in acting, there's a thing called the character study. Okay, so like when you imagine like Dustin Hoffman when he was casted to play the role of Rain Man. You got to imagine the level of studying, that he did to get into that role. The role so he could really effectively and powerfully play the role of someone that ain't him. In fact, someone that's like really, really different from him. That's some deep studying. Well, let's all do that. Let's be the listeners who are doing character studies with the person that we're listening to, the people that we're listening to, right? When we're listening to other people's experiences, other people's, woes, other people's favorite things in life and their struggles, just listening to people, with that Deepak Chopra, like locked inness, as if we're listening to the most fascinating thing that has ever been shared in the history of man. And practicing stopping knowing anything, stopping formulating responses in our heads as they're speaking, stopping doing that, and being beginner's mind, clean slate, character study, phenomenal listener, a sponge, saying, my mission in this moment is to get as closely as a human could to get this person, to get them on the deep, to understand their experience of life, and to be excited about how different that is from my own, because diversity is so amazingly great. Thank God for it, right? That's fun. So let's get into that. Let's stop our bullshit egoic nonsense, our practices of being fucking smart or being right, and shut up and learn about, study this character, get to know them so well for the joy of doing that, and know that one of the many miracles that's occurring in doing that is you are empowering the hell out of that person. Like I told you, when you feel, you know what it feels like. You know what both of these experiences feel like. We all do. When you're not being heard. This is one of the things that Larry was talking about, Larry Fitzgerald, in his article yesterday, which really resonated for me. We all know what it feels like to be unheard. Like there's something really important, and you're trying to get it out. You're trying to communicate it, and you're not being heard, or you're being discounted, and which is not being heard. And if that goes on long enough, that drives you crazy. That'll have you act out in ways that you're not going to be too damn proud of, right? So that's one effect of being unheard, and it's disgusting. We all know it. And what about the other effect, right? Like I was describing how I felt with Deepak when he was like so lasered in, and it was obvious that he was so interested. And this is like a guy who's one of the most, maybe the most famous personal development spiritual teachers on the planet now. And it's like, and he's like locked in, listening to this dude talk about his experience. And it had me, and look, here I am 10 years later talking about it like as if it just happened, right? Because of the way it made me feel. You're bringing that when you're a phenomenal listener. That's a gift you're giving to the person that you're listening to so deeply. And finally, I want to wrap this up by saying that I'm open. Okay, I want us to all practice being open for business, in the business of eradicating racism from the planet, starting with ourselves. I'm open for listening. Okay, and I'm inviting you to make the commitment to be open to the following as well: for listening, for being a phenomenal listener, and listening to everyone. Not necessarily agreeing, but listening. Open for dialogue. I'm open for healthy debate. I am open for solution-focused, problem-solving brainstorming. I'm open for connection. I'm open for support, to provide support. And finally, we'll wrap it with this. I'm open for remembering. Let me bring this full circle. For remembering how we all are when we start this life. The beauty of that we exist in the state of course we're ashamed. That we don't have to entertain it. We don't have to even think about it. We have no conception whatsoever of separateness. That's so beautiful. So I'm open for remembering that we are all one.